What if the man you trusted to protect your neighborhood was secretly stealing from it? In the quiet, palm-lined streets of Bay View Heights, a gated community in Miami-Dade County, that question wasn't just a hypothetical, it was a gut punch that left residents reeling. James Carter, the HOA president everyone admired, had been siphoning off overdue law $15,000 in dues meant for cracked sidewalks and rusty playground swings. Behind his warm smile and crisp polo shirt was a web of lies that unraveled faster than anyone could have imagined, and when the truth came out, it wasn't just a scandal. It was a betrayal that shook the community to its core. Bay View Heights was the kind of place where hedges were always trimmed, and the gates clicked shut with reassuring precision. It wasn't flashy, but it was orderly, a haven for families and retirees who paid their quarterly dues to keep it that way. James Carter fit right in. Tall, with a steady voice and a knack for remembering birthdays, he wasn't a politician or a big-shot CEO. He was just a guy with a clipboard, a Bay View Heights branded polo, and a way of making you feel like everything was under control. He'd overseen small upgrades, faster gate entry, brighter streetlights, pressure-washed sidewalks after hurricane season. Community barbecues ran smoothly. Newsletters arrived on time. To most residents, James wasn't just the HOA president. He was the glue that held Bay View Heights together. When the board re-elected him for a second term, no one blinked. Why mess with a good thing? But good things, as it turns out, can hide ugly truths. Somewhere along the way, things started to slip. Not in a loud, obvious way, just small, nagging details. A landscaping company kept showing up in the budget, but nobody had seen their trucks in weeks. A plumbing invoice, marked urgent, popped up for a repair no one remembered. Bank statements, once neatly color-coded, started reviewing late with half-baked summaries. James had answers for everything. Just a temp vendor, he'd say, or, "We paid that early for next quarter." His voice never wavered, and who had time to dig into the books when the guy seemed so trustworthy? So, nobody pushed. Not the treasurer who once asked for receipts. Not the secretary who noticed a double payment. They all told themselves the same thing: James is solid. He wouldn't risk it all for pocket change. But pocket change adds up. Behind the locked door of the HOA office, James's laptop held secret spreadsheets nobody saw, emails he deleted before passing on access, texts from vendors who never showed up at meetings. Nobody was looking, though. Why would they? That is, until Sarah Thompson took over as president in April 2025. Sarah wasn't out to stir trouble. A retired county clerk with a no-nonsense streak, she just wanted to keep things steady, maybe replace the faded community bulletin board. But Sarah had a habit of checking systems, and on her second week, she sat down with a stack of binders, a laptop, and a cup of black coffee to do what she called a spring cleaning of the books. It started innocently enough, flipping through maintenance logs, scanning contractor invoices. Then she spotted it, a due law $7,146 payment to Blue Wave Plumbing, a company she'd never heard of, dated 6 months back. No work order, no report, no memory of a plumbing crisis. Curious, she dug deeper. Blue Wave was real, but their office was 30 miles away, far from Bay View Heights' usual local contractor. Sarah called the number on the invoice. The guy who answered was friendly until she mentioned she was the new HOA president. "You're calling about the condo job, right?" he said. "Second floor unit, busted main line." Sarah's stomach tightened. "Condo? This is for Bay View Heights HOA." Silence. Then, "Ma'am, that was a private job. Lady said her brother was covering it through a business account." "The address?" "A one-bedroom apartment owned by Carla Carter, James's sister." Sarah didn't react. She just jotted it down, her pen steady. But the air in the room felt different, heavy wire. This wasn't a mix-up. She opened a new folder on her desktop, labeled it "Irregularities," and kept digging. By her third week, she'd flagged 6 transactions, including an due law $8,500 payment to a Rico Mendoza Construction, with no license, no vendor history. Instead of emailing for clarification, Sarah trusted her gut and called the number. A nervous guy named Rico answered, claiming he'd done patchwork, but couldn't recall where. She pressed, and he caved, agreeing to meet at a Dunkin' Donuts off I-75. Rico showed up in a paint-splattered hoodie, eyes darting like he expected trouble. Over a coffee he didn't drink, he spilled the truth. James gave me checks, HOA checks. I cashed them, gave him most of it back in cash. Said it was off-the-book stuff. I didn't ask questions. Sarah stayed calm, letting the silence push him to hand over a check stub from his truck. As she walked back to her car, her mind raced. This wasn't sloppy bookkeeping. It was a scheme, and James Carter was at the center. Word spread like wildfire. A whispered question about the plumbing invoice hit the community WhatsApp group, and by morning, the chat was a storm of screenshots and outrage. Residents who'd trusted James, voted for him, even invited him to their barbecues, were floored. I paid my dues late last year because I was in the hospital, one woman posted. And I was funding his sister's pipes? The betrayal stung. These weren't just numbers, they were hard-earned dollars meant for playgrounds, patrols, cracked sidewalks. Evelyn, a retired teacher who'd lived in Bayview Heights for 21 years, wrote, I thought James was different. Now I can't sleep wondering what else he took. Neighbors stopped chatting about gardening or weekend plans. Every conversation turned to budgets, invoices, and who should have caught this sooner. Sarah didn't join the chat frenzy. She stayed focused, building a dossier with tabs for payments, emails, and timelines, her neat handwriting marking every page. On April 10, 2025, she drove to the Miami-Dade Police Department, her folder on the passenger seat. I believe there's been theft, she told the investigator, her voice steady. The officer opened a file and listened as she laid out a trail of EVY too clear to ignore. Back in Bayview Heights, James vanished from sight. No more board meetings, no group emails, no walks around the neighborhood. His car stopped parking at the clubhouse. His LinkedIn quietly dropped the HOA badge. 3 days later, 2 detectives showed up at the HOA office, asking for financial records and interviewing the board. It was official, now a criminal matter. Whatever James hoped would blow over was already too late. Then came April 17, 2025. It was a sunny morning in Kendall, Florida, the kind where shadows cut sharp lines on the pavement. At Pine Hill Market, shoppers pushed carts, unaware of the black sedan pulling into the lot. 2 plainclothes officers stepped out, walking toward a man in a blue polo loading oranges into an SUV. James Carter, one called. He turned, froze, then nodded. No fight, no words, just cuffs clicking shut. Grand theft, overdue law $15,000. A woman in yoga pants stopped dead, recognizing him. Another aimed her phone, not to gloat, but to confirm. Texts flew. They got him. At the market. A small crowd gathered, silent except for one soft word. Finally. James didn't look at them. His face was blank, like he'd known this moment might come. The car door closed, and he was gone. The arrest wasn't the end, it was the start of something harder. Bayview Heights went quiet, the kind of quiet where neighbors avoid eye contact. Trust was broken, and fixing it felt impossible. 3 days later, Sarah called an emergency town hall. The community center filled with folding chairs, tense faces, and crumpled budget reports. Questions flew like darts. How much else did he take? Was he alone? Why am I still paying dues? Sarah didn't dodge. She laid out the plan: an external audit, frozen funds, full cooperation with police. It wasn't enough for everyone, but it was honest. Weeks later, the real work began. Invoices were triple-checked. Vendors were vetted. Lawyers were hired. Slowly, the playground swings got fixed, the sidewalk cracks filled. But the bigger fix was trust. Residents who once signed dues checks blindly now showed up to meetings, poring over budgets, asking hard questions. We were asleep. one board member said. "Now we're not." By May, James Carter stood in a Miami courtroom, his crisp polo swapped for a navy suit. No clipboard, no confident smile, just a defendant facing a stack of EVY Denke. The prosecution was methodical, fake invoices, cash checks, a clear pattern. His lawyer talked about stress, family pressures, blurred lines. But the judge wasn't swayed. No bond, too much money, too much proof, too much risk. James left in cuffs, his footsteps echoing in a room where his old title meant nothing. Bayview Heights didn't throw a party. They didn't need to. Kids were back on the playground, scooters zipping over smooth sidewalks. Parents watched, not with the old ease, but with sharper eyes. HOA meetings buzzed with new voices, new rules, no single signature, no unchecked vendors. James's name faded, but his shadow lingered, not as fear, but as a reminder. Justice didn't come with sirens or headlines. It came through Sarah's quiet persistence, a paper trail followed to the end. And that, more than anything, was enough to start again.